So today marks the 14th day of protests taking place across the United States, around the world, surrounding the death of George Floyd. The more recent and peaceful demonstrations prompted authorities to lift curfews, thank God, in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, where I live, and Buffalo, New York. Over the weekend in Washington, D.C., huge crowds turned out and hundreds of people held a die-in near Lafayette Park, where police had tear-gassed protesters days before. Now, for those who don't know, nobody actually died at this die-in. Everybody is okay. They just pretend to die and they lie on the ground, but everybody is okay. Meanwhile, in New York City, tens of thousands of people marched across the Brooklyn Bridge on Saturday, and they later gathered in downtown Brooklyn, where protesters broke curfew in order to march. The protests inspired Mayor DeBlasio to make a dramatic policy reversal. As recently as Friday, DeBlasio had expressed skepticism about cutting police funding, but by Sunday morning, he had changed his tune, and in the early morning, he announced on Twitter that New York City's curfew, first curfew since the end of World War II, would end effective immediately, and that he had also agreed to support a ban on the use of chokeholds by law enforcement, provided it includes an exemption for officers facing life-threatening situations. Now, that exemption, is going to be used by every police officer. I thought my life was in danger. That's why I had to choke the person. So, everybody is also taken with a grain of salt, very skeptical. DeBlasio also announced that he's going to defund some of the New York City Police Department, but everyone seems to be very skeptical that that would actually ever happen. Meanwhile, we still have a racist orange dude in the White House, hopefully not for more than a few more months. Please, Joe Biden, don't say anything stupid. Please, all he has to do, this guy, Joe Biden, is not say anything stupid. All right? And he will be elected because the other guy's demented and he's a racist and everyone knows he's demented. It's like Joe Biden versus a demented racist, and all he has to do is just show up and not say anything stupid. Okay? People would vote in a bar of soap over this guy in the White House right now. So I'm just praying that Joe Biden doesn't say anything dumb to actually make this a race, but hopefully he won't. Well, in any event, the orange guy, AKA Donald Trump, AKA racist dude in the White House, and he's not a dude, a racist guy. He's actually a racist, a terrible guy. Announced Sunday that he's going to begin withdrawing the National Guard from Washington, D.C. after a weekend of peaceful protests. He tweeted, "I have just given an order for our National Guard to start the process of withdrawing from Washington, D.C. Now that everything is under perfect control, they will be going home, but can quickly return if needed." Far fewer protesters showed up last night than anticipated. But actually, in fact, tens of thousands of protested peacefully throughout the country Saturday and Sunday, the largest crowd ever in the nation's capital. So we do not know what Trump was looking at when he said far fewer protesters, but in fact, it was all peaceful. The police chief in Washington, D.C. said there were 0 arrests made Saturday. The third day in a row, no arrests have been made in Washington, D.C. Thank God. Now, there was a big turmoil over whether, Trump should bring in the military to quell the protesters, and some people wanted it. And, besides the fact that you have your military turning on citizens who are peacefully protesting, the big deal with bringing in the military. So I'm thankful that the National Guard has stepped away and has withdrawn, is that the U.S. military, for our entire history from 1776 all the way to the present time, has been apolitical. Apolitical meaning not taking a political side. Never takes a political side. Our military, the U.S. military, what makes, I think, America a great country, one of many things is out. And by the way, we have a lot to go, obviously, based on these protests. But our military doesn't take sides in politics. It's non-political. And as soon as you have the president of the United States calling the military to take a side, which is the side of people like Donald Trump, racists, white supremacists who want to end peaceful protesting of racism, Once the military takes a side, you have now made the military a political tool of whoever is ordering the military to go up against the protesters, in this particular case, Donald Trump. And you have now made the military a political tool, which leads to fascism, which leads to the end of democracy. So I'm very happy that the military and our military leaders said they were not getting involved as well. Meanwhile, in Minneapolis, a veto-proof supermajority of the city council pledged their commitment to defund and dismantle the city's police force. Tweeted one council member, "Yes, we are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department and replace it with a transformative new model of public safety." I do not know what that means. I don't get defund police. I don't get it, because we need police. Just because the police are racist and you get rid of the racist police doesn't mean there's no bad people in the world. There are bad people in this world still who need to ultimately be arrested at some point. And these bad people, they're white people, they're yellow people, they're green people. There's an orange guy in the White House who's a bad guy. They're black, they're brown, they're every color. Not saying that everybody, but there's a small group of them, with bad people that need to be arrested. You need police. I don't know how you can not have police. So I don't get the defund police. I get the let's remake the police to what we want the police to look like. I get let's take away a lot of the military hardware that the police have. I get that when you give a police officer the authority to, without having any overview over that authority, well, you know, that could lead to corruption and racial arrests, and so you need to have an advocate or a group that oversees the police to make sure that they stay in line. Somebody has to police the police, which we don't have in the United States of America, to make sure that they stay in line. I think we need more training. There's a lot of things. I don't know about defunding. I personally, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm not in favor of defunding, because I don't know who's going to arrest the bad people. There are still bad people in this world that need to be arrested, that we need to be protected from, that good people of the world need to be protected from. In Seattle, I don't know if you saw this, it wasn't all very peaceful. A man drove into a Seattle crowd protesting the death in police custody of George Floyd before shooting one of the demonstrators on Sunday. We have video with audio about this. It's terrible.
Oh God! No! No! Oh God! Oh Jesus! Oh God!
So meanwhile, the shooter was detained. A 27-year-old man who was shot in the arm was taken to the hospital. He's going to live. We don't know who the shooter was yet, but I assume he was not a fan of the protesters, most likely some sort of bigoted, racist, terrorist, crazy person. We don't know. We'll find out. The family of George Floyd gathered on Saturday. They had a private funeral in North Carolina to honor his life. Mourners were led in invocations, prayer, and music. Ruby Floyd told the crowd, "God is on our side." She is one of the family members. In Houston, Reverend Al Sharpton is expected to deliver the eulogy at the funeral service for Floyd, and Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden was planning, I don't know if he did or not, but was planning to meet privately with the Floyd family today. I don't know if you saw this, but former president nominee for the Republican Party, Mitt Romney, he marched. He ran for president against Barack Obama in 2012. I forget. It's either 2008 or 2012. I believe 2008 he ran against Barack Obama, or 2012. Well, in any event, he ran as a Republican. He's a senator now from Utah. He marched with a group of Christian demonstrators in Washington, D.C. on Sunday evening, protesting the death of George Floyd. There he is, in videos posted on social media. Romney is seen wearing a mask as the faith-based protesters marched down Pennsylvania Avenue towards the White House. Romney had previously posted a statement on his Twitter account calling Floyd's killing abhorrent and emphasizing the importance of peaceful protests. Romney told NBC News, "We need a voice against racism. We need many voices against racism and against brutality. And we need to stand up and say Black Lives Matter." Now, can you imagine if this was not Romney, but the actual president of the United States of America would walk out of his White House and do what Romney did and walk with the protesters and say, we need a voice against racism. I, as the president of the United States, I am not the president of some people who voted for me. I'm the president of everybody, whether you voted for me or not. And as the president of everybody, whether you voted for me or not, we need a voice against racism. We need many voices against racism. I'm going to lead that voice against racism from the White House. And we need to stand up and say Black Lives Matter. Can you imagine if we had a president who said that? What a transformative moment this would be for not only people who live in the United States, but people around the world. That there was a moment in time this week that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, could have transformed the world. And he absolutely failed. You know, we have a Senator Romney doing it, but can you imagine if it was the president of the United States? What an absolute failure of leadership by Donald Trump. Meanwhile, 2 Buffalo police officers in New York, they are now facing criminal charges in connection with the graphic caught-on-video shove of this 75-year-old man during a protest. We have that video. There he is. Yeah, they shoved him, and he was bleeding out of his, look at that, bleeding out of his head. It was terrible. Now, officers Aaron Torgalski and Robert McCabe, they were charged with second-degree assault during their video arraignments on Saturday. Meanwhile, in Georgia, the father-son racist team of Gregory and Travis McMichael, who were arrested in the shooting death of Ahmad Arbery, they were back in court. Each man faces murder and aggravated assault charges. Now, while many, including attorneys for Arbery, believe that the shooting was racially motivated, and it appears it was, because there's even testimony now that the son or the father, I forgot who, had called out the N-word after shooting Ahmad, but they will not be charged with a hate crime in Georgia. And you want to know why they're not going to be charged with a hate crime in Georgia? Because there is no hate crimes on the statute books in Georgia. Georgia does not have a crime entitled hate crime. There are no hate crimes in Georgia. You can't commit a hate crime in Georgia. Georgia is actually one of only 4 states, South Carolina, Wyoming, Arkansas being the other 3, that have no hate crimes. Now, a hate crime is an offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with an added element of bias, according to the FBI, which prosecutes federal hate crimes. Arbery's killing has sparked new pressure for a state hate crime in Georgia. And all I got to say is, come on, Georgia. It's now 2020, and Georgia, which, by the way, Atlanta, with a very large black population, I don't know what of a middle-class black population in Atlanta. I don't know what the percentage is, but I know there's a very large middle-class black population in Atlanta. How does Georgia not have hate crime in 2020? Come on, Georgia. Get your act together. So I got angry when I actually read that. So meanwhile, here's what's going on in New York City. More than 400,000 people returned to work on Monday in New York City. Phase 1 of the city's reopening is just beginning. More than 205,000 people were infected with coronavirus. We're all under quarantine and we're all under curfew. But now, phase 1, whatever that means. Well, we'll tell you what that means. So hundreds of thousands of workers. Phase 1 is construction jobs, manufacturing, retail stores. You can go to the front of the door and say, "Hey, I need a package of underwear. Can you bring it out?" And they'll bring out a package of underwear to you. Okay, but you can't walk into the store. You can only buy your underwear outside the store. So it's all curbside. "Hey, I need 6 socks. 6 socks, please." And then they'll bring out 6 socks to you. So that's how the retail stores, I guess, are going to work until they allow people in phase 2. Whoop, I got my pen in my hand. Phase 2 into the actual store. Now, all of this is based on the fact that new infections are now down to only about 500 infections a day that are being registered in New York. So it's now low enough that New York City is hoping that their new core of contract tracers, so they're the people who find out Joe has coronavirus, let's speak to Joe, and let's get on the phone with Joe and find out everybody that Joe was in contact with. Then we got to call all of those people that Joe was in contact with and get them tested. And those people who test positive, we are going to quarantine. And that whole idea is that we have a low enough number now that we'll be able to trace everybody, so that way the infection rate doesn't explode again. Now, the only hitch in all of this has been the protests. We don't know for another 2 to 3 weeks how the protests will affect the public health, which is how many people are getting coronavirus. I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, I don't know if anybody knows who Alexis Ohanian is. He is the husband of Serena Williams, the tennis star. He is also white, and he is the co-founder of Reddit. And he has made an announcement on Friday, 3 days after former Reddit CEO Ellen Pao slammed the company for nurturing hate speech, that he is now resigning from the company's board of directors. Ohanian said Friday, "It is long overdue to do the right thing. I am doing this for me, my family, and my country. I'm saying this as a father who needs to be able to answer his black daughter when she asks, 'What did you do?' So I have resigned as a member of the Reddit board. I have urged them to fill my seat with a black candidate." Ohanian also pledged to donate the future gains on his Reddit stock to serve the black community, and announced a $1 million donation to the Colin Kaepernick Know Your Rights camp. Now, the $1 million to Colin Kaepernick is amazing. But if you think about the future gains on his Reddit stock could be billions and billions of dollars. He is now pledging to donate what could potentially be billions and billions of dollars to serve the black community. So my hat is off to Alexis Ohanian. Now, obviously, there's a big debate on what's going on tech and social media. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, he made waves when he hit a tweet from Trump amid the initial wave of George Floyd protests, proclaiming, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." And he put the tag on Trump, which now Trump's not happy about. And meanwhile, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, he's not doing anything on Facebook. We'll see what happens. I don't know if anybody saw President Trump visited Maine on Friday and toured the Puritan Medical Products Facility. Now, he did not wear a mask, and this is the facility that makes the swabs. And there he is, not wearing a mask, while the guy next to him, if you go back to the other picture, the guy next to him is in a hazmat suit, which is what you should be wearing in this facility. Why is he in a hazmat suit? Because they're making the swabs that go up your nose to see if you have coronavirus. Nothing can be contaminated. Look, everybody else is in hazmat suits, and Donald Trump is sticking a swab in his mouth to pick out the cucumber between his teeth. So meanwhile, after his visit in Maine, everything that was manufactured for that day, they had to throw out, because Trump, by walking around without a mask, without any hazmat suit, ruined all of those supplies. We need every last one of them. Meanwhile, several cities have lifted the curfews, but leaders around the country, they expressed concern that demonstrators may lead to an increase in coronavirus. So I had mentioned before, but what I forgot to say is that a lot of our country's leadership in public health is urging people who did take part in protests to go get tested. In New York City, if you took part in a protest in New York City, the tests are free, and you can go to any city MD and they'll do it absolutely for free for you. You should do it. And this was a nice thing before we end our schmooze. I don't know if you saw what happened in Nashville, Tennessee. 6 teenagers led a 10,000-person protest in Nashville against racism and police brutality on Thursday. It was the largest protest in recent history in Tennessee. Jade Fuller, Nia Collins, Z. Thomas, Kennedy Green, Emma Rose Smith, and Michaela Smith, ages 14 to 16 years old. They met on social media, and from there, they decided to put this protest together. Fuller, who was one of the teenagers who put it together, said, "We all met on Twitter, and that's how easy it is to do something like this. That's what really opened people's eyes to what's been going on in our country." So soon after they met, they put this whole entire thing together. As one of the teens said in a speech, "As teens, we are desensitized to death because we see videos of Black people being killed in broad daylight circulating on social media platforms. As teens, we feel we cannot make a difference in this world, but we must." Oh, I want to say this one other thing. This was also a beautiful story. I don't know if you saw in Philadelphia, the bride and groom who got married and then joined the protest right after they said, "I do." So thousands of demonstrators, they took to the streets in Philadelphia Saturday. They were protesting the death of George Floyd. But these two people, the bride and groom, stood out. Kerry Ann and Michael Gordon, wearing their full wedding attire, joined protesters at City Hall after their wedding ceremony. Video shows the couple holding hands as the surrounding crowd chants "Black Lives Matter." The newlyweds then raised their fists in a symbol of solidarity. Kerry Ann Gordon told ABC News, "It ended up being a very powerful moment. Not only are we feeling the movement of the people, but I'm meeting my husband on our wedding day as a strong Black man and a good representative of who we are as people, what our men are like, what our culture is like." It was just a very, very empowering moment for us, considering all of this that's happening at one moment in one time. She also said that we will all see this injustice. We all want this needle to shift away from the status quo that made this day more memorable in many ways.
Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.